Aloha and welcome to Spirit Chat Radio. So, today I'm going to be talking about why empaths don't sleep well. This is a question I get very often in my groups. People are talking about it in my groups. They're wondering what's going on. Why are they not sleeping well? Is anybody else having trouble sleeping? This is a super common question that I get all the time. I also get emails about it. It's a whole thing. People are wondering about this all the time. My empaths are wondering about this all the time. And so I thought that this would be a really good uh, subject to do a podcast on, so that you could kind of understand what's going on during these time frames, during this not sleeping well time. But before I get into that, I did want to mention that my Empath U is now open for you empaths wanting to get a handle on your empath ability a little bit more. And I did a soft launch to my email list, so that's a very good reason to be on my email list. Is I will do things like that before I release them to the public. And it is now out there. You can enroll. I also will be doing a free masterclass coming up pretty soon. If you want to kind of see the type of stuff that I teach about in the class, and I'll be talking about that once that's up and going. But this Empath University has a lot of different classes in it, and the one I did a soft launch on was my Empowered Empath course, and I actually used my bundle and put that out there to my people, and that includes the knowledge part of the course and then the coaching program bundled together. And I have to tell you, I was super excited to release this course. I was so stoked about it because I really truly feel like it's some of my best material out there. And I was still floored by some of the responses I got. I have gotten so many people with happy tears. I did not realize it would provoke that type of response. And so many grateful emails saying, I cannot believe I finally understand this, and I feel different just by taking this course. And it's literally changed my life. Like, I get emails every day like that. And it's amazing how much that this course has affected people's lives. And I'm truly, truly grateful for that, and that I did that. It makes me feel very happy that I can help other empaths, because that was my mission. And that is going to continue to be my mission moving forward. As I've talked about before, I know that there's other people that teach about being an empath, and I know that there's a lot of different stuff out on the internet. And what I typically have found, because I'm such a strong empath, is that a lot of the information out there is very lacking, and it's not coming from a place of truly understanding the empath gift. It's coming from a place of repeating information, and not really understanding the gift itself. And you can't manage an empath gift very well, hence this podcast where I'm going to be talking about the sleep stuff, if you don't have a good grasp on what the ability is and how that this ability affects different aspects of your life. And today, one of those aspects is going to be sleep. That's what we're going to be talking about. And there's a lot of information about empaths and sleep out there. And I was kind of laughing at some of it because people had brought it to my attention. And they're talking about some very basic things like you're around people energy all day. And so you absorb this energy, and that gives you anxiety at night. And so you cannot sleep. And I thought, really? You're these people who are kind of talking about this. Yes, that can be part of the problem. It can be a little bit of it. You never want to discount necessarily that aspect, but they're missing a huge factor of why the empaths typically don't sleep well. And that's why I wanted to do the podcast. There was some of that, and then there was some of you're stressed so much during the day that your cortisol levels are high, your stress hormone, and that's causing you anxiety at night, and and causing you not to sleep. No, that's kind of a regular people problem. That's not an empath problem. You know, if you are so stressed out during the day that you typically cannot sleep at night because you're worried about like stressful things, or bills, or tomorrow, or whatever, that's not an empath problem. That's just a problem. That's just a regular everyday stressor type of problem. And yes, that will probably make your cortisol levels go up, and it will probably affect your sleep. But that's not what I'm talking about, because like that's a thing that anybody can have, and that's going to require retraining your brain so that you're not going to bed stressing about things. That's a whole different area. That's not necessarily an empath deal. So there are some reasons, very specific reasons behind being an empath and why you don't sleep well as an empath. And a lot of this is going to revolve around one very specific thing that I'll get into in just a minute. So let's first talk about what I mean by typically not sleeping well. Like I said, I get this question often in my groups. I'm just feeling frustrated. Why am I not sleeping well? I don't understand this. Is anybody else not sleeping well? What's happening? It can be really frustrating when you're not sleeping well. And what I mean by that is having some issues like waves or bouts of insomnia. Not that you've been an insomniac necessarily your whole life, because as an empath, if it's related to your empath abilities, there will be times that you typically can sleep here and there. But waves or bouts of insomnia that kind of gets worse sometimes, better other times. You still are not going to typically sleep well as an empath, but there'll be worse times and better times, worse times, better times. Then waking up several times in the middle of the night. Waking up several times. That's really tied to being an empath, as long as you don't have some other issues going on. But kind of waking up for no reason, or feeling like you're a very light sleeper. Back to the waves of insomnia, which I kind of skipped over. Going to bed very, very late and waking up very early in the morning. That would be another thing that I'm talking about with insomnia, just because you're not tired. Now, I am not a morning person whatsoever, but when I have these waves coming in, I definitely will go to bed at 1 or 2 in the morning, which is kind of typical for me because of my weird sleep patterns and habits, and I will just be wide awake at like 6 a.m. or whatever. It's something that I am not, I don't love to do. I don't love to wake up in the morning, but when I start waking up wide awake at 6 or 7 a.m., yeah, I definitely know I'm going through one of these bouts. Being wide awake between 3 and 5 a.m., that's another one. These are all the things that I'm talking about. Just being up in the middle of the night, having the waves and bouts of insomnia, being awake between 3 and 5 a.m., having very inconsistent sleep patterns, or just having not typical sleep patterns. And like I said, this can be incredibly frustrating as an empath. So we're going to talk about why this is happening so that you kind of understand it, because that's what's going to be helpful for you. And there are some things that you can do about it, and I'm going to get into that as well. But yes, typically in my household, this is actually normal. All of these things that I was talking about. So the one thing that why empaths don't sleep well, the one thing that typically is a primary reason for this, that I believe and feel that gets overlooked really, really a lot, is People constantly talk about their empath ability being this and that and the other thing, but for some reason everybody's separating from what it truly is, and that is, it is one of your psychic senses. It is one of your clairs. And because it's one of your psychic senses and one of your clairs, that is really where a lot of this sleep problem is coming in. And why that is because as one of your clairs, it is, you are clairsentient. This means that you have the ability to read energy. And as you have the ability to be sensitive and read energy, just like clairvoyance is clear, you having the ability to see things, etc., you will have to be able to understand how that ability, how this psychic sense works for you. Because it also typically is going to not just work on its own, it's going to work with some of your other psychic senses. And if you're having a lot of trouble sleeping as an empath, you're going to typically find that either, number one, you're starting to have an awakening as an empath, and your senses, all your senses usually tend to heighten during that time, because when specifically this one, when clairsentience, that ability starts to heighten, your other abilities will be pulled along with it. Whatever abilities that typically you work with or have been gifted with, those abilities will heighten. It's like a domino effect. And so that is going to be a huge component to what's going on with your sleep patterns, because it's a psychic sense and it works with other psychic senses. Now, this is going to be a little bit complex, but I know you can understand this. I'm going to make it really simple for you. Being clairsentient means, especially when it's involved with your sleep, that you're going to be sensitive to basically 3 types of energy, but 2 of them are very similar. They fall in the same category because there's different categories of energy. I get into all of this in my empath classes and stuff. So if you want to know more, you'll have to go ahead and take one of the classes, because there's a lot more that I get into. But there are basically 3 different types of energy that are going to primarily affect your sleep, that will be connected to your clairs, your clairsentience. And I'll talk about the first one first, and then the other 2, because they fall into the same category, but to me they're different types. So during the day, you're dealing primarily with a lot of physical energy, and that's different than what happens typically at nighttime. So when it gets towards nighttime, spiritual energy is a lot higher. And that's why I'm talking about that this has a lot to do with your clairs, because the spiritual frequency of the spiritual realm begins to raise. And that you start becoming very aligned with and very in tune with as an empath, because again, it's one of your psychic senses, and one of the energies that you can feel is spiritual energy and spiritual frequency. And so as that begins to heighten during nighttime, it's kind of almost like a flip-flop thing. Your spiritual body, that's kind of its time to align and sort of get energized, is during the time the spiritual frequency is higher, the spiritual realm frequency. During the daytime, it's lower. It's actually lower. So you don't notice it as much during the daytime, this higher frequency. So what happens when you align with this higher frequency? Your spiritual body becomes awake. It becomes more energized. It becomes more aligned with this higher energy frequency that it's not really aligning with during the daytime, because that's when the frequency is lower. So it's kind of like you've had an energetic shot of caffeine, I guess I would say. You're just, a spiritual realm frequency is higher and you start to align with it, which causes all these bouts of insomnia. The interesting thing about the spiritual realm and the frequency being higher is it is the absolute highest between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. So when you find that you are really awake during those times, that's because that's when the spiritual frequency is the highest. The interesting thing about all of this stuff, too, is you might also find that as an empath, you have such a hard time sleeping during the day, but you may actually have really good nap or sleep during the nighttime. Sorry, not during the day. But during the day, you might find that you sleep really well when you take naps. That's because the spiritual frequency is lower during the day. And when you're aligning with spiritual frequency, a lot of times people do it unknowingly while they drift off to sleep. So if you're aligning with a high energy frequency while you're sleeping, you're going to have light sleep, disrupted sleep, whatever. But if you do it during the daytime when the energy's lower, you can fall into a deeper sleep and not be so kind of energized by this spiritual frequency. You can fall into a much deeper sleep. And so you may actually find that during these times, and this is like one of the things I'm talking about, if you're having a lot of struggle with trying to sleep during because you got to get up and work and you got to, feed your kids and do all that kind of stuff, you might, if don't fight against it so much. You might find that it's better if you can grab some cat naps during the daytime, if possible, if your schedule allows, and just not try to fight it so much. Actually, I find that I'm not necessarily more tired during the day when this happens. I might be more irritated, but I'm not necessarily more tired. So what I've learned to do is, because I noticed that a lot of empaths, part of the problem is they start stressing, like, oh my gosh, I need more sleep. I know I need more sleep because I'm wide awake. But if you pay close attention, if this is an empath issue, you will find that you're not necessarily more tired during the day. Not necessarily. If you are, you can take your little cat nap, but you're probably not going to necessarily be more tired than if you would have slept like stronger through the night, because you get that energized frequency coming through. You're aligned with that. You're absorbing it, and so that was something that took me a while. That I was just like, I really was like, oh my gosh, I need more sleep. Like, I was up all this time, and then after a while, I just got tired of fighting it. So I'd just throw a movie on or something, and I might watch the movie for an hour and fall asleep, or maybe 2 hours. But I would find that I still would wake up very alert and very awake. So that's the other thing. And so spiritual frequency, because it's part of your psychic senses, has a lot to do with you not sleeping well. There are different times when this frequency is higher related to what I'm going to get into now. Sometimes that frequency is, let's just use a scale of 1 to 10, just to help you understand this. Sometimes the spiritual frequency at night, even though it's higher at night always, let's just say it's always at a 5, it's always highest, and then the daytime it's like at a 2 or something. Sometimes it might be at a 7, sometimes it might be at a 10, sometimes it might just be at a 5. And there are some other factors that usually come in to play during this time, which is the other energies that you're going to find that you may be aligning with or feeling because of your this psychic ability, this psychic sense. Is there are different types of energy waves that come through, and a lot of this is astrological and also what's kind of happening with the whole consciousness of the earth and the universe and all of that sort of thing. there are different energy waves that come through. And this is why I do the energy reports. Because with these waves will come in other stuff as well. It's not just going to come in and wave and just completely disrupt your sleep pattern. It can actually disrupt other things and or bring opportunities. And so if you follow my energy reports at all, when the waves are stronger, when these higher energy waves come through, then you're going to notice a more disrupted sleep pattern at that point in time. And these can typically affect a lot of areas of your life. But like I said, these universal waves that come through, the energy that flows through, sometimes this part you will want to imagine it like sometimes it's calm. The energy flowing through is kind of calm, like kind of water, just a calm water. And then the next thing you know, like a day or two later, it might be like you're having a flash flood, and then all of a sudden just this raging rush of energies coming through. So on the calmer water days, you might find that your sleep patterns aren't so disrupted, but then the next thing you know, this huge rush of energy comes through just like a flash flood, and then just sleep is out the window altogether, just out the window. So that's another thing that can be very disruptive to your sleep patterns, that is also again related to your psychic sense of being an empath, because these are things that you can feel. These are energies you're reading, which brings us to the other thing that typically falls within this same category, but it's to me a different type of energy in this category, is lunar energy. When you're talking full moon, new moon, positioning of the planets, things that are going on like that, stuff of that nature, those will also very much have an effect on empaths, those who their psychic sense is tuning into energy, because lunar energy is really, really powerful. And I find it very interesting that we've gotten so far away from this when, in the ancient times and thousands of years ago, even hundreds of years ago, before we had the type of calendars that we have now, even people who didn't really know about this stuff, they definitely relied upon, lunar cycles and lunar energy, and they knew that it had an effect on earth and people and crops and animals and all different kinds of things. And now it's sort of an afterthought. Nobody really thinks about it. It's kind of a joke. I mean, they kind of know about it. Like, obviously, full moon, people are crazy, that kind of joke. But they don't think about how it affects their own life internally, especially when you are stronger in a psychic sense, and how that's going to affect different patterns in your life. And these things don't just, these energy waves and these lunar cycles, especially the energy waves, they also typically affect other areas of your life, relationships and money and all different kinds of things like that, and in life path changes and shifts that are going on. So the whole point of all of this is, yes, as an empath, your sleep will be affected. But as you can see, it is affected by your ability and your psychic sense of being clairsentient, which is also tied to your other clairs, which are going to be working in a collaboration or a tandem type effort when you're awakening as an empath, developing as an empath, or you're a strong empath. They will work well with your spiritual body. Your spiritual body senses will be your psychic senses, just like your physical senses, your touch and your feeling and your sight and all that is working with your physical body. And so it is definitely a part of you. Now, learning to manage all of this and understanding how these things are all tied together, that's a whole another thing. And that's why I created the courses that I've created, because it will come down to management techniques and different things. Um, there are a few different things that I'll point out today for you. A lot of understanding this gift and managing this in a way that makes things feel easier. That's more of a training that gets into, like I said, that my classes, the one is 30 hours, so it's not something I can do in a simple podcast. But it's there for you if you want to learn more about that. One thing that is important when we're experiencing these bouts of energy and these waves and the lunar cycles, and you're awakening and you're really aligned with spiritual energy, there are a couple of things that you will want to be aware of. One of them will be grounding, because while I glazed over the yes, you're around people all day, and the people energy stuff that they were talking about, like you're going to take that home and take it to bed and be overwhelmed with energy because you went into Walmart that night. Yes, that can be a factor, but it's not as huge a factor as, that's kind of like a symptom, right? It's a symptom of being highly sensitive with your psychic senses. That's a symptom of that. And so how you treat a symptom would be grounding. Yes, you would want to do some grounding and clearing potentially. So when you're finding that these waves and bouts are stronger, maybe the spiritual energy is higher, the lunar cycles are stronger at that time, or there's some crazy chaotic energy wave coming in messing things up for you. Some of the things that I do, besides of course all of the energy management techniques, is you will want to make sure that you're grounding more during that time. And by grounding, that means you will want to be clearing excess energy away from you. And a good way to do that we like to do that is, I've talked about this before, but like the showering at night, clearing is another thing. So maybe using incense or sage or something like that in your bedroom, because that you want to keep that spiritual energy clear, because with a heightened spiritual frequency, you're going to have all kinds of vibrations of spirits also that come with that. And you want to make sure that stays a high frequency. You want to make sure that you're clearing out any low vibration spirits or spiritual energy that might be hanging out with that frequency. Because just because the spiritual frequency is higher doesn't mean that you're just going to get all high vibes spiritual energy coming through. No. In fact, sometimes when what will cause very during these high energy wave times, what might cause some disrupted sleep as well is really intensely weird spiritual dreams that are not so awesome, that are feeling very low vibe to you. And so we want to make sure your spiritual energy is clear. And so incense, saging at night, showering at night, exercise at night is probably not people's funnest thing to do, but I find is hugely helpful. Hugely helpful. It really rids you of excess energy. And because I am very in tune to the high vibe energy at night, that's where I feel like I need the most grounding. Not in the morning when a lot of people exercise, although I think that that's a great time to exercise, just for the physical aspects of waking yourself up and doing all those things and getting the blood flowing and all that. It's fantastic. When I am using exercise for a grounding technique and in a spiritual sense, nighttime's better for me, because that's again when you want to pay more attention to the higher frequency. For those of you who just find that you're typically stressing at night, again, that's just retraining your brain. and trying to restructure how you're falling asleep and making different sleep patterns. So that's not really going to relate to an empath ability. That's just going to relate to managing just day-to-day stress in your life. And then the other thing is to, if you need to, take advantage of the lower frequency during the day, the lower spiritual frequencies, and take some naps, cat naps here or there. Even if you take, sometimes I've even taken like 15-minute naps at like 7 at night because I know I'm going to be up till 2. And it just happens to work out perfectly that way. And then understand and realize that most likely, your other abilities during these nighttime times when you're not sleeping, they are probably going to heighten at that time. You might have some spirit contact going on. You might be doing a lot of astral travel during that time. But usually when your empathic senses heighten, they're bringing along with it other senses. It's the same as like if you see something with your eyes and you go to pick it up, you're using your hands and your touch, and you might smell it. You know what I mean? They're working together. They're working as a package. And so that's another thing to keep in mind, is they're going to be working, your psychic senses are all working together as a package during these high frequency times. So hopefully you found this helpful. Your not sleeping is definitely tied to your psychic senses, and that's what an empath ability is. It's tied to your other senses, and it's tied to its very specific ability, which is its ability to read energy, and especially tuning into higher frequency energy, which will be the energy waves, the spiritual frequency at night, and lunar moon phases. And when these things are getting disrupted, and the funny thing is, you can actually tell without even knowing about it. Like, let's say I didn't even do an energy forecast or anything, and you didn't even check the full moon, new moon stuff or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're noticing not 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights that you're disrupted, the sleep pattern is disrupted. That is a really good indication right there that there's some other stuff going on energetically. The frequency's higher, and there's some disruption in the force, I would say. So you're having some disruption going on. Anyways, but I will keep trying to do the energy reports for you so that you kind of know what's going on, and that you're like, oh, okay, because like I said, understanding it brings an overall sense of relief. Don't try to force it. Don't try to force sleep, because it doesn't work. I guess you can try, but I've never had success with that at all. I find it better to realize and pay more attention to, I'm really awake. Like, and the next morning I'm still awake. So I think that you're going to find a better success with the knowledge of what it is. You can relax into it a little bit. Make sure that you're doing your grounding and clearing stuff. And then pay more attention to, you're probably not as tired as you think you are. You're just irritated and frustrated. And take your cat naps. And if you want to get into this further, definitely hop on over to the Empath University. And if you don't know if you're an empath, or you're wondering what abilities that you have that go around along with your empath abilities, like I said, they work as a package, take the quiz below, because I've put together some really awesome quizzes, and you can find out what kind of abilities you have, and or if you're an empath. It's an awesome quiz. And I'd love to see you at Empath U. And I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, definitely subscribe and like and comment. I try to get back to my comments within the first 24 hours. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And good luck sleeping, and have the most amazing day. Aloha.